From deep inside Africa, a sound is emanating that is causing reverberations around the world. It's the sound of Judaism. A sound of a people casting off 2 centuries of colonialism, returning to what they say are their native roots.
I know from birth I'm a Jew. Only I know that my forefather missed the way.
I grew up alongside every other Igbo youth. We kept on hearing that Igbo people came from Israel.
There was a story my mom told me at the age of 6 years. I never forget. He said, the Igbos are Jews.
And it's the story of one man, Shemuel, who went searching for what that meant and found answers on the internet, prompting a journey that led him to a community of thousands of Jews. A place where resources are few, but commitment transcends. Through prayer, practice, ritual, diet, and song. But this is also the sound of doubt from Jews in America.
They would ask me, are you from America? Or I would say, no, I'm a Nigerian. They say, you black? I said, yes. They said, no, it's not true.
And rejection from family and friends.
I am like an outcast among them.
And in this volatile Christian-Muslim nation, doubt often turns to violence. This is the story of the Igbo, 25 million strong, a people once under siege by their very own government.
Biafra declared its independence.
And a people once captured and shipped across the Atlantic by the hundreds of thousands. A people who helped build America, and a people whose descendants are now discovering their Igbo roots, raising questions of cultural identity for countless African Americans.
Many African Americans actually do not know that they have Igbo heritage. The chances of their being Igbo is much, much higher than their chances of coming from Ghana or from Western Nigeria.
If you're from the right county in Virginia, you probably have a 60% chance of having Igbo ancestry.
It's a story of the strength of belief, ancestry, and community. Boosted by a visitor who inspires everyone and helps take Shemuel's dreams to a whole new reality. The Jews of Nigeria are re-emerging.
They consider themselves descendants of an ancient tribe in existence in the Promised Land for thousands of years. However, returning to home soil, they've been faced with government oppression and have been struggling to be properly recognized. RT's Paula Lier went to hear their story.
Deep in Israel's Negev desert are the remnants of an ancient people trying to build a modern homeland. But these mostly black Americans are not Jews, nor do they profess to be. Instead, they call themselves African Hebrew Israelites, descendants of ancient Israel.
We sang about the River Jordan. We didn't sing about Mali or Songhai, Timbuktu. We sang about Jericho, Jerusalem, and Canaan's land.
And the songs were passed down through the generations born and brought up in the United States. They believed that when the ancient Jerusalem temple was destroyed by the Romans, their ancestors fled to West Africa, from where they were taken to America as slaves. In 1966, a Chicago steelworker, Ben Ami Ben Yisrael, had a vision that it was time to return home.
Everyone is called according to their portion. And our portion was, that to establish the kingdom of Yah. And the kingdom of Yah represents a new idea, upon the planet.
And so Ben Ami set forth with some 400 people who, much like Moses in the Bible, spent 2.5 years wandering in Liberia before reaching the Promised Land. When Ben Ami arrived here in 1969, just under half of those who'd left America with him had managed to finish the journey. This was to become their home here in the Negev desert. But successive Israeli governments made their lives difficult. Because ironically, while the country is founded on the so-called law of return, these returnees are not seen as Jewish, although many feel the issue runs deeper than that.
When you get down to it, the world still has a problem with color. It's just a matter of color.
And so these people of color are often dismissed by mainstream Israeli society. For years, their children could not attend the local schools. They had no health care. They were marked for deportation. But despite the obstacles and their ongoing struggle for recognition, they take pride in their traditions.
When we understand the dynamics of what is taking place.
They're polygamous, strict vegans, make sure everyone follows an exercise program, and are big supporters of preventative health care.
We are an integral part of the state of Israel. This was the vehicle that was used to bring us back to the promised land.
And it's here in the desert wasteland that the community has multiplied more than 60-fold since it first came to the Negev. They say their intention is to be an example of peace and light to other nations and worship God, not religion. Paulus Lier, RT, Dimona.
On the border of Black Africa, as the Nubian drummers played into the night, I was reminded of my work 20 years before with a southern African tribe called the Lemba. As far back as anybody could recall, the Lemba had claimed to be Jewish, effectively a lost tribe of Israel. Their oral tradition said they were led out of the Holy Land by priests at the time of the Babylonian invasion, and that they'd taken a sacred object they called the Ngoma Lungundu with them. I believe that the Lemba and the Ngoma hold the key to understanding what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. When I first arrived in Africa in the late 1980s, I hadn't been searching for the Ark at all. I'd come here purely to investigate Lemba claims that their ancestors were Jews who'd once lived somewhere to the north in a place they knew as Senna. Today, the Lemba live either side of the Limpopo River in modern-day South Africa and Zimbabwe. When I first came here, there were still Lemba elders alive who would refer to their people as the white men who came from Senna. But at that time, it wasn't clear where Senna was. I hadn't seen my old friend Raulinga for many years. He's one of the guardians of Lemba traditions and was keen to remind me of the uniqueness of his people's culture.
We adore and worship Yahweh, the only one. We don't adore ancestral spirits. We don't worship idols of animals, trees, stones, the sun, the stars, or the moon, which Yahweh has made. Culture is the backbone. It's a unifying force. Now, I know culture changes in accordance with time and place, but the root of culture remains the same. You see, now we have lost touch with our people for about 2,600 years now.
The Lemba were convinced that they were a lost tribe of Israel. The problem was that no one believed them. They appeared to be completely African. But I discovered a number of mysterious legends and customs that were very un-African. Men from other tribes were not allowed to marry into the Lemba. They refused to eat pigs and certain other creatures. They practiced the ritual slaughter of animals with a special knife. And they circumcised their male children at an early age. Many of today's Lemba are Christian, but blend elements of Judaism even into their services.
I'll lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help.
By the mid-1990s, I'd become convinced that the Lemba claim that they were of Jewish origin could be true. They'd preserved so many Jewish traditions for so long. But final proof only came when the science of genetics was applied to Lemba oral history, and geneticist Trevor Jenkins decided to examine the Y chromosome of Lemba males. His interest had been sparked by what he'd heard about Lemba culture.
The musicologist, Margaret Nabarro, told me the Lemba were of Jewish origin.
I think she said that their music showed some signs of Jewish influence.
Yes, she did. And so I went with her to a Lemba cultural festival and collected my samples there.
Astonishingly, Jenkins discovered that the Lemba were indeed of Semitic origin. Subsequent research done by other geneticists showed that a significant proportion of Lemba men had a Y chromosome pattern known as the Cohen modal haplotype, which is characteristic of the Kohanim, the ancient Jewish priestly class. They were effectively a lost Israelite tribe.
It was a vindication. For the Lemba, we always knew that we're Jewish, okay? But it was for those people on the outside that had said we're just making claims. You know, that here is proof that one cannot tamper with. These people are who they say they are.
What was even more surprising about the DNA research was that the Cohen genetic fingerprint was especially strong in one particular Lemba clan, as geneticist Himmler Sudyal explained.
The Lemba identify different clans, and one group that had it at a frequency in excess of 50% was the Buba.
According to Lemba oral tradition, the Buba clan formed the priestly class and were responsible for leading the Lemba out of Israel. Genetics had confirmed that some of the Lemba's ancestors had indeed carried the DNA fingerprint of the Jewish priestly class, the Kohanim. Science had verified that part of their oral history. But could I believe the rest of it? That they'd been led out of Jerusalem by priests at the time of the Babylonian invasion and travelled to Africa via a place called Senna, carrying with them a sacred object called the Ngoma Lungundu.